I just had a great conversation with Jocelyn on smarter online safety, and we were talking about how to secure devices and different things that you can do when you get a computer and your phone to make it more safe and more secure. And I hope you guys will check it out.
Welcome, everyone, to the Smarter Online Safety Podcast. I'm your host, Jocelyn King, and I am so excited to be here today with a guest we had to bring back by popular demand. We've gotten such rave reviews on his previous guest episode, Mr. Todd Mitchell. Todd is a veteran in cybersecurity, and he focuses his business, Cybersecurity for Biz, on helping small businesses protect themselves and all their assets and employees and their customers' personal information, which is what we talk about a lot here, that you have to learn how to protect yourself. Well, he's the one helping the small businesses you work with protect themselves better. And he is such an expert and one of the most helpful cybersecurity individuals I've ever met. So, Todd, welcome back to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor.
So great. So one of the reasons I brought you back is because we get so many questions through comments and emails and also just the questions in our workshops as well. Devices, people's smartphones and PCs, it's so confusing. It is such a convoluted landscape out there because, we come with preset device settings. When you get something, there's questions about your browser and what you should set, and it's just confusing everybody. So we've got some questions from a lot of our viewers that we just want to go over with you and get your expertise on so we can, straighten all this out and eliminate the confusion. So one of the things I'd love to start with is what are the absolute must-have security settings that most people overlook on their phones or computers?
Well, I think I'll say the phones first. I think the biggest thing that people overlook is permissions.
Okay.
Um, so every app you download, everything you go, all your department store apps and music apps and all that, the first thing they come in, um, they're set up the way your phone works in the background is they don't have permissions for every little thing. They clump them into a lump, and it's like, oh, do you want to give this permission to like say something that's going to listen to music needs your speaker, right? But they don't have speaker separate. They have speaker, microphone, camera all lumped together. So you're saying yes. So now this app has permissions to get into your camera, view your photo gallery, and all this other stuff. And all you need it to do is play music. So, but afterwards, you can go back in and look at the permissions of what apps have permissions to what. And one of the things I do, and everybody has their own philosophy, and that's fine. For me, the only thing that I need on my phone, yeah, I'm looking at like location, for an example. The
Right.
only thing that needs to know where I am to do its job is my weather app.
Okay.
Home Depot doesn't need to know where I am. Walmart doesn't need to know where I am. So I go back into the permissions and delete that, or maybe change it to only when app is in use or something like
Right.
that.
Or
Um,
like your map, if you use Waze or Google Maps.
right. Yeah. Your map needs to know, but even then, it only needs to know where you're at. Well, you can always say yes when it asks. But so that's one of the things that you need to look at is all the permissions for your who can turn your microphone on, who can turn your camera on, who's activating your GPS and knowing where you're standing.
Right.
And really think hard about really who needs that and do you ever do it?
Right.
Maybe like my phone app. But I never use video calling on my phone because I use Google Meets or Zoom or whatever. So I can shut that off. They don't need
Right.
permission to my camera. So things like that. And if you try to do something and you don't have permissions, it's going to pop up and say you got to change it. So it's not like you can't go back and add it in if you need to. Um, and then as far as computers, one of the biggest things that's overlooked is having admin access running all the time instead of only when you need it. So your best way is to make
I
sure.
don't think a lot of people know what that setting is. So if you're going
Okay.
into your settings, describe that a little bit so people can.
So when you go into your accounts,
Mhm.
depending on whether you're on Windows or Apple, it's a little bit different buttons that you click and
Right.
menus to get there. But when you're going into those accounts, what you want to make sure that you're if you're the sole user of your computer, you're set up as an admin already.
Mhm.
But there's usually settings in there that a little box you could check or something that say don't use it as admin all the time. So now
That's
you don't have admin permissions. And that's where sometimes you'll see if you're troubleshooting some things on your computer or you're trying to install something, you have to like right click and say run as admin instead of a regular account. And the reason for that is if somebody hacks into your account, you don't want them to be able to download software and delete things and copy things without your permission. So acting on a daily use when you're using your computer, having reduced privileges can be a little bit of a pain in the butt for you as a worker, but it can keep the bad guys from being able to get to anything when they get into your computer.
that right. So, and it's not when you add up the time, it's not really that big an inconvenience.
It's
It's just
not.
occasionally. And then when you know, oh, that's right, it's because I'm protecting myself from the bad guys. That's a good reminder for
Right.
yourself as well. Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. What about the built-in security features like Windows Defender or Apple's built-in protections? And are they enough? That's a question we get a lot.
Yeah. Um, I'll start with the last part first. Yes, they're enough for most users. If you're a business and you're trying to protect customers' information, it's not quite enough. If you have regulations you're trying to meet in certain industries, healthcare, financial, government contracting, things like that, you definitely need better than what comes on your computer. Um, but for the most part, for home users just trying to keep themselves safe, usually those are adequate protections. Um, Windows Defender is actually, I mean, it had a bad rap in the 90s and in the 2000s, but they've improved their security drastically, and it's actually it got rated in the top three the last couple of years. So it's right up there with Norton and Avast and McAfee and all those. Same thing with the Apples. It's pretty decent security. It's free. I would say turn it on. Even if you go pay for something else, third party, still have that one running at the same time, and then you're kind of double protected.
Right. And let's talk about third parties. So just, for the average user, first of all, coming from cybersecurity, there are over 4,000 cybersecurity companies, and there's, dozens of categories and subcategories of types of software. And it's just, it's daunting. Even people who work in cybersecurity have trouble keeping track of it all. So for the average user who's looking at antivirus, anti-malware and stuff, okay, they're going to turn on the security settings for their PC or their for their Windows based or their Mac. What about, when should they look at also buying Norton or also buying Malwarebytes or things like that? There's a lot of confusion about do I need this or do I already have it and what's it going to add? Could you address that? I know it's
Um,
a loaded question, but at least at a high level, give
right.
the context for how to think about when would you buy additional and when would you not?
I would say that if you um so some of the differences is going to be well, first of all, like the difference between antivirus and anti-malware is almost invisible. There isn't really, it's
Right.
more in the naming.
They
Um,
used to be different, and now
they
pretty much everything includes both.
Everybody protects for everything
Right.
for the most part. Um, And I would say a lot of it is the look and feel, the comfort level, right? Windows Defender and the one built into Apple, you have no control. You turn it on and it just does its thing. You can't change any settings. The third party aftermarket ones, um, those all basically do the same job. And quite honestly, behind the scenes, when they find something on somebody's computer, they
Mhm.
report it to a national database called the CVE, the Combined Vulnerability Exchange. And then somebody at that exchange, we actually pay people. One of my professors in college did this for a living to download this new thing and put it on the computer and watch what it does and see where it goes and figure out how to kill it, right? And then they put the fix back into the exchange, and then all those companies pull that fix. So it's not like you're going to get a certain virus because Norton doesn't know how to fix it, but McAfee does. It's like if one of them knows how to fix it, they all know how to fix it. It's
Okay.
everybody gets the same information.
That's a
So what
great,
you're,
that is a great insider tip that
yeah.
most people don't hear and that you can't find on the web. So thank you.
Right. Yeah, because if you think about it, you've never heard of somebody getting a virus because Norton didn't know how to fix it, but somebody else did, you know. But so what you're actually paying for and the differences between them is the look and feel and the customer service behind the scenes.
Okay.
So that's just a personal preference on which one's easier for you to use, or whether you care about getting a hold of somebody on the phone, or do you want to email them or use a chat bot or whatever. That's basically what you're paying for. Um, and I would suggest a lot of it's just a personal preference. You know, how safe do you feel? Do you
So
you know?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, I was just say, you know, some people feel tech savvy enough that they're not worried about that much security because they stay away from the bad places. Other people don't know the difference and are clicking all kinds of buttons, and they need some software to stop them from getting in trouble because they don't know themselves. You know,
Got to
so that's
protect yourself from yourself sometimes.
right. So that's where which is where the business side comes in, where they tell you got to have better for a business, because as a business owner, you don't know what your employees are doing. You don't know whether they're smart enough to not go into the bad website or click a phishing email. So you need to have a little bit better security to force them to do the right thing, kind of a thing. Yep.
Well, and we help companies at Smarter Online Safety train their employees for that very reason because, I mean, a large company, it's a 4.5 to $7.5 million impact of that one employee clicking on the phishing email,
Mhm.
is too huge a thing. But most people don't know how to protect themselves or their companies. They don't know the difference between a phishing email and a regular. And that's why we do this podcast to help people understand
Exactly.
it.
Yep.
But let me
Yep.
let me ask you this: Can you one of the things that happens a lot, first of all, 82% of all corporate of all corporate hacking that's done is actually human error or human inspired. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, but it's an employee based. It's somebody inside the organization clicking on something they shouldn't have, and so that's huge. So this is really great.
Yeah.
And then if you're on your personal device, turning these things on and adding so if somebody is really not that tech savvy and doesn't really understand all the cyber security and let's say they have a Mac, would they do you recommend then that they get a Malwarebytes in addition?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, if the less you know about security, the more I would recommend that you go ahead and spend that, 20 bucks or 50 bucks or 100 bucks a year or whatever it is to get somebody else's security on there.
Right. Because that's your security team basically is the stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. Now, one of the things that we've been looking at and we're showing is with AI helping cyber criminals replicate sites. So now, you go into you can, you've seen these too, but you can see some fake sites that look a lot like your actual mobile carrier or like your bank or something like that. They're now able to look at any of those types of websites and have AI replicate it for them. And so you can't tell by looking anymore. You can't say, oh wait, that's their logo, but it's kind of off, or that doesn't sit there. Now it looks identical. What can you walk us through the safest way to download apps and software without accidentally installing something malicious? Because you may go to a download that looks
Right.
legitimate to you, if to the untrained
And
eye. How
yeah,
can they protect themselves?
I say the safest thing is go to the source. I tell people this a lot. If you have a Brother printer, go to brother.com and get the driver for it. Don't
Right.
go to Free Drivers R Us or whatever and download some little tool that's going to run on your computer and tell you every time you need to update your driver. Because the problem with these free tools is, like you just said, most of them are either intentionally downloading malware on your computer, or they're just built with no security in mind, and the malware people slid it in there, so that company may have good intentions, but you get a bad outcome. So you want to get it from the source. And Windows and Apple both do a pretty good job about finding what drivers they need. So I would go through your operating system and let it find the right drivers. If you do need to go to the manufacturer, like for printers, things like that, sometimes the one that came with Windows doesn't work right, and you got to get your own for the original one. Um, like I said, go to the source. Um, if it doesn't have a company name behind it, and the thing like you were talking about with a lot of these fake websites, uh, the one surefire way when you get an alert or you get an email that says you got to go here and check this out or whatever, ignore their links and just go how you normally go. I mean, if you got
Treat it like you
AT&T,
got it in the mail as written.
exactly.
You
You
have to
know,
go to the source.
if you have an AT&T phone
Mhm.
and AT&T gets a hold of you and says click here to do whatever on your account, if you already have an AT&T phone, chances are you've got AT&T.com saved with the password saved in your browser or something somewhere on your computer already anyway. So just
Right.
use that, to take you to the right place.
That's great. One thing we've seen too is then people will go in and Google search, like they've learned, oh, okay, thank you, from the podcasts and the trainings and stuff, they've learned, okay, don't click on it. But one thing that happens because cybersecurity, cyber criminals are smart. They've been doing it for a long time. So if you Google it, you still have to be careful because you still have those those fake websites even showing up as sponsored links. So
Yeah.
you got to still, even when you show up, the sponsored links at the top of a Google search, you don't want to click on those necessarily either. You still
Right. I always avoid those sponsored links because, for one, like you said, they could be false.
right,
The second thing is the number one way to know whether you're going to where you want to go or not is to hover your mouse over the link and see, and it pops up down at the bottom of your browser and tells you where it's going to send you. And with those sponsored links, it's sending you to one click, whatever gobbledygook, and not to the actual. So you don't really know where you're going. So I
right,
always go to the directly to actual site name and find it that way.
right. So hover and don't click. That's a great tip, everybody. And then are mobile security apps worth it, or do they just slow down my phone and drain it? That was one of the questions we got from people.
They are worth it. And I will tell you, the phone itself may come with some security or may not, depends on the manufacturer, like Samsung or whatever. But almost every major, I'll use that major word, major phone carriers, AT&T, Verizon, stuff like that, they come with security on the phone.
Hmm.
A lot of times you got to activate it. It's not in there. And then they have free, and a lot of times it's free. And then, of course, they're going to want you to upgrade for the paid one and all that stuff. But that goes back to like what I was saying before. The difference between the free version and the paid version is the
Right,
customer service.
right.
The protection is already going to be there. So go ahead and activate it and just have that free stuff running in the background. And it usually does not slow your phone down very much.
That's awesome. What about biometric logins like Face ID or fingerprint scanning? Is that safer than using a PIN or a password?
It is, but it's safer if you do both. That falls into that multi-factor authentication thing.
Right. Okay.
Um, the safest way is to have this kind of a both, but because it goes off the premise what multi-factor authentication is three things, right? Who
Hmm.
you are, what you have, and what you know. So a
Right.
password is something you know, and other people can guess it or whatever. Then there's the what you have, which is like your phone. So that's where texting a code to your phone because you're the only one that has your phone, right?
Right.
Unless you leave it laying around and somebody else has your phone, So and then there's the who you are, which is the biometrics and the retina scans and the fingerprints and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the best security is having a combination of at least two out of those three things.
Right.
Um, but if can you only use one, I would say biometrics is going to be more individualized. I can guess your password, I can steal your phone out of your purse and hit the button to, say it was me or not. It's really hard to duplicate your eyeball. So,
Right. Right. So far, we
right.
still have protection. That's right. And your fingerprint. We still got for some amount of time, that's still a good setting. That's great. How do browser settings make or break somebody's privacy online?
Uh, that is a good question. So how browser settings, there's a war going on between you and wanting security and your browser and trying to gather data. And yes, your browser's gathering data unless you use Firefox. If you know, Google has made billions off of Chrome browsers and collecting information and selling it to marketing companies. Edge is doing the same thing. Unless you've got one like Firefox comes from and DuckDuckGo is another one where they come from developers. So there's really nobody behind the scenes to collect that information. It's a nonprofit kind of a thing that's making this up. But for the most part, your browsers has a ton of information, whether somebody's doing something with it or not. Um, so you want to delete your cookies once in a while in your history and things like that.
And so
But
that's clearing your cache,
yep,
CAC.
clearing your cache, deleting the cookies, deleting your browser history. Um, Firefox,
And
you
just so
can,
I can say, because then when you go to a new website, they're actually able to get info about all those cookies. That's
right,
why when you're searching for something on a site, all of a sudden, people go, well, how come I get 5 ads right after that and stuff like that?
right,
This is how
exactly.
it's. Mhm.
That's and the other thing that it also does too is, especially if you're on your own device, it's not as big of a deal. If you're in, like I'll say, a public library or using a
Mhm.
school computer or something where somebody's going to, internet cafe where somebody's jumping on right after you to do something, or if you're at home and you have one of them situations where you got one computer in the house and there's five of you using it, um, you'll find with these cookies that contains the session data where you did the little three-way handshake to get into your bank account. If you don't delete that, the guy behind you comes in and goes to Bank of America, whether on purpose or just happen to be lucky and has the same bank you do, and it's
Right.
still logged into your account. It doesn't ask him to log in again because it remembered the last time it was there from a couple of minutes ago when you were using it.
Right.
And so,
Anybody who's ever gotten a new computer and logged in and had the thing flash up that says we don't recognize this device,
right.
that's the
Yep.
proof of
So
that.
so those are ones where, deleting those things every once in a while, or every time if you're using a public device with multiple users, you want to delete them every single time you get off the computer. Basically, that's your end thing is you don't just get up and walk away. You delete, 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 and then shut the computer, down or whatever, or log out of your account. Um, and
There's
that's the
also,
safest
you
way.
can also in a lot of browsers pick private versus that. You
Mhm.
want to talk, could you talk briefly about that?
That's kind of, in my opinion, it's like a VPN, which I'll get into a whole drama about that if you let me. But um, they're good for a reason, but they lately have been oversold to do a whole bunch of stuff that they don't really do.
Right.
Um,
And they're not keeping you private from the marketing people trying to get your
well,
information.
that's part of their right, because it's still on your browser. They still know, right? So what it's doing is it's masking your location, is
Mm,
pretty much what it's doing. So, uh, but you can almost do the same thing if you just shut off your location settings.
right. I
So-
think, well, the reason I bring it up too is it gives a lot of people a false sense of security of thinking, oh, I'm in privacy mode. So
right,
they
exactly.
think they're actually in stealth mode. Those are two very different things.
Yeah. And and that's my thing with VPNs. VPNs are um
So for those
along
listening, a
those same way.
VPN is a virtual private network. Can you tell people what it does?
So what a VPN does is it masks well, I'll explain it this way. I've got a good analogy. So think of the internet as a garden hose, right?
Okay.
And the garden hose, for our hypothetical, has a little window in it. I can look in the window and see all the water going through the hose.
Mhm.
If you use a VPN, you're hiding your stuff in a straw. So now when I look to the window, all I see is a straw in the middle of the hose. I
Okay.
can't see what's inside the straw. So that's what a VPN is doing. But just like your garden hose, it's got to connect from someplace and go to somewhere else.
And that's where
So
you have vulnerabilities, is at the connection points.
at the connection points, first of all, and second of all, when you get these big VPNs like NordVPN, they've had these. I've actually noticed yesterday that they changed their commercial, and now they say they help improve parts of cyber because they had commercials running 6 months ago that made it sound like that was the only thing you ever needed in your whole life was just to have a VPN and you were good. And it
Right.
was like, no, because how do I know, NordVPN? maybe all powerful and omnipotent, but how do they know every connection to every little podunk town credit union or whatever that you're trying to connect to? So they don't know what's on the other end. So they're, they can do a little bit. What they're most useful for and what they're originally intended for is when years ago, remote workers had desktops at work and they worked from home and they had to get from their home computer to their work computer to access their files. And that's what VPNs were originally made for, is a tunnel into somebody else's network.
Right.
Um, Now the practical use when you want to use a VPN is if you use public Wi-Fi.
Yes.
And
Like
my
if you're at the library or Starbucks or wherever.
Yep. And my general rule I tell people for Wi-Fi is if you can get to the internet without putting in a password, it's not safe. Use a VPN or a hotspot.
Okay, there you go. And
If
we're going to
you're
have the whole episode on VPNs as well because it's such a hot topic and
right,
really helping understand it. So,
yeah, they have their use. Don't get me wrong.
right.
I'm just my I guess my little pet peeve about the whole thing they've been oversold to make it sound like that's like the only thing you need for security.
Well,
And
I'm so glad you said that because we had somebody show up to our workshop last week who had NordVPN and thought that it protected them. They didn't need anything else, and they got hacked, their website and stuff. And so, and again, I spent several years in cybersecurity. You've been doing it your whole career, and you don't know what you don't know until you learn
right,
about it. So, I think that it's easy to say there is no one thing that's going to protect you from everything because
no.
because like you've got the hose, but then you've got the endpoints of the hose, and that's where attackers can
Yeah,
get in. You can through human error click on something, you get that supposed email
yeah,
from, I got one yesterday saying that my iCloud videos and photos were going to be deleted.
right,
And right there, blatantly, who it's from has nothing to do with Apple or iCloud, but it's very compelling. And again, here's the bottom line, what hackers rely on is putting you into a panic mode so you're not thinking. You
yeah,
immediately are worried that your videos and photos are getting deleted or your data is getting deleted or your bank account, your mortgage payment's not going through or
yeah,
something. And so you click on something that you shouldn't because you're not thinking straight. So
right.
that's the fundamental
Eh,
playbook of all hackers. So
eh,
to your point, there's no one thing that's going to protect you except you learning these different things that we're teaching you
Right.
on the podcast and in the
And
trainings.
that's the perfect example, like you just said, having a VPN, which is a secure encrypted connection, from you to the phishing email you just clicked on, is not going to save you from the phishing email. It's just going to make sure it was encrypted when it comes back to your computer, so nobody else can
Wow.
steal it.
I am so glad you said it. That is so good. Yes, that's a quote. That's a
Yeah,
quote. Thank you for that, Todd.
yeah.
So we've covered a lot here, and let's just recap for everybody. So I've got a new PC, and since that's the dominant 65% of all, Mac of all computers are Windows based, and 16% are Mac. So let's just say I had a new PC. Um, what are the three or four things that I should do when I have that to make myself as safe as I can be on that computer?
If you possibly, it depends on what operating system you're using, and I don't mean by, Apple or Mac, versus Windows, but what version of the operating system. But enabling whole disk encryption, I
So,
think Mac calls it the Firebolt. Um, and uh, then the second thing was like I was talking about
so
is
basically, you're encrypting everything
you're
on your own
encrypting your
device,
entire hard drive. So if somebody tries to pull the hard drive out of that computer and take it and pull all the data off of it, it's just going to be gobbledygook and it's unreadable.
but you're protecting all of your PII or personally
Yep,
identifiable information
exactly.
from
Because we
actual
all have it, whether
physical.
you think you do or not. If you're over 18 and pay taxes, you've got a whole bunch of information stored in your computer someplace that you don't need everybody else to get their hands on.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and then the second thing was like I was talking about before with checking your permissions.
Right.
The third thing is having a good strong password to get into your computer and setting that lock screen up
Right.
so
And
that if
don't,
you
oh,
walk
thank you.
away after a couple minutes, it goes black and you got to put the password in again.
Right. Even if you set it for 30 minutes, but there's so many people who don't lock their computer screen because they want to come back to it. I've dealt with so many people who even had a family member or a kid's friend visiting the house who got onto their computer because they left it open. So there's always somebody who can get into your house. Even if you live alone, somebody could hack into your house, or your landlord can come. There's always somebody who could get into your computer if it's not locked up. So that's great
Yeah.
advice to just put on your lock screen. And like and sometimes it's hard because even with Apple, I'm a big Apple fan as well, but they'll give you like choices of 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or never kind of thing. And
Right.
I think there is a 30 in there. It's been a while since I looked at them, but you sometimes people want it to be like 3 hours, and there isn't an option for that. So
Right.
pick the one closest to what you want that's not never. It's not
Right.
never lock the
Exactly.
screen.
And I would say, unless you use your computer to watch movies and
Mm,
you're sitting there not touching anything and just staring at the screen for 2 hours for a movie, other than that, if you're actually working and pointing and clicking and checking emails and whatever, hitting the next thing on your music or whatever, then it's never going to shut off anyways because you're still using it. So,
right.
yeah.
That's so awesome. Thank you for these tips. Thank you for the info. I know that everybody listening is now smarter and safer as a result of this information. Thank you so much. And if people have a small business and want to learn more, they can reach you at cybersecurityforbiz.com. So there you go.
Yeah.
And you're going to be a recurring guest, and also for everybody, Todd helps Smarter Online Safety, works with us as a partner on content for our trainings and all. So you can also email us or get in touch with us if you'd like to learn more about that. So thank you so much, Todd. This has been so great. And everybody, please take an action today to make your device smarter. You've asked the questions. Today you've gotten answers. Now take some action and put it into place so that you'll be smarter and safer yourself. And until next time, stay safe out there.